Thank you, Stefan. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to, to make a little presentation of what we've been trying to do with Bernhard Asselofer from the University of Vienna. So that's something that we did together with other people that will be a knowledge in the end. The starting point was that Europeana dearly wanted to play with linked data. And the problem, for all the reasons that you've been presented today and yesterday, the problem is that there were quite some obstacles when we started thinking about that maybe 1 year or 1.5 years ago. So the first one was the lack of rich metadata. So we had simple metadata. I will talk about that in more detail later. We had no links to other data sets, which is of course quite important if you want to talk about linked data. And finally, we had no agreement with data providers on how to, on the possibility to release the data in Europeana openly on the web. But recently, there have been many progresses on all these aspects. And you've heard about the data exchange agreements yesterday, and the big leap forward that this represents. But actually, before that happened, we already had decided to set up an experiment, just with a part of Europeana data. So maybe a bit, as was reported in the previous presentation, we decided to start small, but at least to start something and play around with stuff rather than wait till everyone would have accepted the idea of releasing their data openly. So we just went out and contacted some providers whom we know would be more willing to participate in that kind of initiative. That results in a subset of the Europeana data, which is over 3 million objects by 9 direct data providers. But of course, as Europeana is an aggregation project, you know that 9 direct data providers result eventually in many more individual institutions which contribute data, and that comes from 16 countries. So this is a pilot, and these slides explain a bit how we've done it. But the important thing, is that it's really aside the production system of Europeana. So the production system comes here. So we get metadata, we perform some semantic enrichment that is loaded into Apache Solr and it's made available via our portal. And what we did is select this subset of the Europeana metadata and build this kind of parallel stack on top of it. So it's really kind of disconnected from the production environment in Europeana. So the first step was to convert the metadata to EDM. So yesterday we had a couple of presentations mentioning EDM and ESC. So ESC is the format that Europeana currently has. Europeana semantic elements, very simple thing, mostly based on Dublin core, and everything is first represented without the possibility to have explicit links. And everything is merged within one single record, which causes some problems when one wants to consume the data. So we've got these famous examples where medieval manuscripts are attached to dates that are actually from the 21st century, because this is the date of the digitization, and this was just lumped together with the rest of the data on the manuscript, which is not optimal. It looks like this kind of table. So you've got fields. And you've got text values. EDM, on the other side, is something that we intended to have we wanted to have a richer mechanism to represent the data. So that's the metadata vocabulary that will be used in Europeana. So as said, we are currently working on implementing that. And that's extending on Dublin Core, of course, but also other vocabularies. And the main idea is to have a finer grain, so not one record entity anymore, but different classes of entities which allow to represent any entity of interest that is related to the objects in Europeana. Well, that looks like that kind of graph. I won't enter the detail. You've seen that yesterday. So we convert this data from the original metadata we have, and then what we do is generate some links. So we are talking about linked data. So what we wanted is to try to get some real explicit links to other data sources. So because this is a pilot, so well, honestly, it won't really be groundbreaking for now, but we just wanted to, again, to experiment and just to build something that would allow us to test a bit our ideas and to build a proof of concept. So the linking to other sources mostly comes from, so first, what we call semantic enrichment. So within the office, we had some effort to actually link our metadata, our object, to some reference vocabularies. So that consists of a small time ontologies and the geonames vocabulary, so big vocabularies of places, and we use that to connect objects to places, while these objects were connected to nothing before. And that gives nice, especially that gives nice multilingual features, because in geonames all the place names are actually translated in dozens of languages, and that allows to really build nicer search functionalities. So semantic enrichment is the first linking. The second one is the link to other linked data services that happen to serve data on the same object as we do. So Europeana is sitting on top of a wide network of data providers, and a couple of them actually already were providing data for the stuff that we have selected in our pilot. So that's from the Swedish aggregator and the National Library of Hungary. They are actually running a linked data service. And of course, if you come later in the game providing data about the same object, it should be really crucial that, well, as a token of goodwill and also of good practice for the entire sector, you just make an explicit connection between the new data you publish about objects and the original data that is sitting on the original institution's websites. So we basically got the data that they were freely providing, and we do a bit of simple matching to relate it to the object identifiers that we have. The next step is, well, basically creating, lumping together all this data and putting it in a big RDF store. Well, that's technically challenging, but perhaps for you not very interesting. Maybe just to say that it's big, actually, even on a small, on the subset of European object that we got, the data model that we have kind of adds complexity on top of the original metadata. So it ends up in being quite verbose data that puts the RDF store kind of in difficulty if you don't run it on a big machine. And then on top of this RDF store, we have implemented a thin layer of linked data redirection. So I think I won't enter the detail of that. Anya may present more stuff on that. The basic idea is that if you are a classical HTML client, you would get just the Europeana web pages for the Europeana identifiers, and if you are a linked data client, you would get raw data in RDF for the same identifiers. So far so good. So we made it. It's available. In the process, we actually found that, well, there were a couple of difficulties, and we found it useful to kind of report. So there's a paper on that that was presented at the Dublin Core conference 2 weeks ago, and we found it useful actually to gather a bit these lessons learned that we observed again in the process. So the first one, and I've already mentioned that, is that the data providers, they can misuse the simple elements that we have in Europeana. So actually looking at the ESC data as it should be in theory, we found out that we should do some mappings to corresponding EDM fields. So that was on paper. We had a nice mapping that say, okay, in this field, we are expecting that data, and it should go here in the EDM model. The problem is that sometimes the providers have used the ESE fields to put data that we were not expecting, which makes the mapping exercise a bit more subtle. Because of course, if you have a richer data model, it makes mistakes more obvious in the end result. The second one was kind of a technical one about data modeling, and that's the fact that the data model uses a notion. So a notion of proxies to represent a certain view on the data. So we are actually compelled to use that kind of trick to separate the data that Europeana creates from the data that is provided by our partner organizations at the beginning. And well, actually, there have been some mention before on the fact that data providers don't like user-generated annotation. Well, sometimes they do like it, and sometimes they are a bit afraid of merging their data with user annotation. And that's the same with the data that Europeana creates. So we have this bit quick and dirty enrichment process, and it's generally good, but there are some errors. And we would not like to merge this semantic enrichment that Europeana does with the original data. So we kind of were forced to find a mechanism in the data model to do that. The problem is that this mechanism eventually results in the data being less easy to exploit. It looks more complex than what it should be in the eye of maybe a programmer who just wants to get data out and start building an app on top of it. So here there is a kind of clash between what the providers would like us to do in the data model and what the data consumers would like us to do in the data model. So that's something that we'll be following up on. And there could be some technical solutions. So RDF has something called name graphs, which is currently being standardized. And as soon as it is standardized, then maybe we'll just change from one mechanism to the other to track the provenance of the data, so who created which part of the data, and thus allow to make selections within the data. So another problem was the representation of the rights and the licensing information. So we actually found some solution to do that. So we use something called resource maps, which kind of represents the data. So we create actually entities in our data publication, which represent the data that we publish. Well, that does the trick. Again, that may result in complex data. The problem that we had actually is that, so we could reuse some stuff from this resource map mechanism. We could reuse the vocabularies which are provided by Creative Commons to represent licensing information. The problem is that somehow we are still not sure whether we did the right thing or not. So there is no really established guideline on how to do it. And we looked around at some initiatives, and pretty much everyone tries to implement their solution, which is similar but not entirely identical to the one of the next project. And of course, the license, actually, at a less technical level, the license itself is still a big issue. So at the time, the data exchange agreements of Europeana were not published, and still they are published, but not everyone has accepted them. So it was out of question to publish everything really formally in a formally open way as Creative Commons 0 data. So we did that only for the data added by Europeana, and the rest kind of lies in limbo. So we hope to actually get that fixed in the coming weeks or month. And finally, the use of the data. So we face the problem that we are publishing this data, but we don't know really how it is used for the moment. So we'll have to do some more work in relation to all these hackathons efforts and try to really get community feedback on that. So the next steps. So as I just mentioned, we are working now on a new version, which is completely CC0. So we've contacted again our providers, asking them if this time they are really ready to publish all their stuff formally in a formally open way. We'll include some more semantic linking to external sources, some thesauri that will bring more more added information to the data. And finally, we'll publish properly the RDF specification for EDM. So in the previous presentation, there was the mention that institutions such as ours or in the government domain have a kind of responsibility with respect to the vocabularies they create, because they can be used as reference vocabularies. And for the moment, we have this reference EDM vocabulary, but we are not entirely publishing it by the book, so to say. So I'm finished now. So these are links if you want to explore or get the data. Of course, you're welcome. So yeah, the conclusion. So I've already mentioned to that. It's still experimental and it will change. Feedback is much welcome so that we could change it in a way that makes sense for the community. And that's some acknowledgements to the people who helped us build the thing. Thank you very much.